day, grade 12 learners, and welcome to today's life science lesson. My name is Tinyiko Vuma, and I am with my colleague and a friend, Mrs. Vedika Maharaj. This lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Center. Today, we are going to look at something very interesting. We are going to be talking about evolution theories. Just for your information, remember that evolution is a big chapter and it has got a lot of marks. So you better raise yourselves up and listen attentively. Let us journey through theories of evolution together. So, just like any other chapter, terminology is key. You need to know terminology. And you know the reason why you must know terminology? It is because in your question paper, we do have section A. 1.1 is multiple choice questions, and 1.2 is terminology. You know terminology, you must know the terms in order to get it. There was 8, 9 marks, 7 marks, depending on the examiner. And terminology is also tested on multiple choice type of questions. Let us just go through just a few of the terms that we need to know. There's many more that will be unpacked as we carry on. All right, so in evolution, we do have what we call a species. And what is a species? A species is a group of organisms. So check this out. It's a group of organisms with similar characteristics. The characteristics must be similar. They must be the same. That interbreed. So there must be a possibility of them breeding. In fact, not a possibility. They must be able to interbreed with one another and produce a fertile offspring. I am underlining for you those basic things that you must not leave out in case you are requested or asked to define species. Then we've got population. Population, if you check at population is now emanating from the species, because defining population, we are saying this is now a group of organisms of the same species. Just check this out. We said species is a group of organisms with similar characteristics. But now population is that group of organisms of the same species and found in a particular time at a particular place. And that's a population. We're also going to talk about punctuated equilibrium. Punctuated equilibrium refers to evolution. By the way, what is evolution? Who can tell? Evolution is that gradual change that happens to organisms over a long period of time. Sometimes when organisms evolve, they take so long that you will not be able to stand and witness the evolution yourself. It will happen after so many million years. And that is why later when you learn about how we measure the periods and the eras in terms of evolution, it is measured by what we call MIA. That is an abbreviation of million years ago. Let us look at punctuated equilibrium. This is evolution. So punctuated evolution is a type of evolution characterized by long periods of little or no change, followed by short periods of rapid change. You need to include both the indications of what will fully and correctly prescribe or define punctuated equilibrium by mentioning that we have got long-term periods, or there's nothing that is really happening, no change that is happening, but out of the blue there is this short periods of rapid change. So there is hardly nothing happening, and all of a sudden within a short period of time there is this rapid change that occurs, and that is punctuated equilibrium. Then speciation. Speciation, you can just relate speciation with species, right? You can see that speciation comes from species. Speciation is the formation of a new species. As I indicated when we started, that the terms are a lot. This is just a snippet of what you will be going through as we unpack theories of evolution. Remember, grade 12 learners, you do have your main book, which is the examination guideline. The examination guideline is your friend. You stick to it, you engage with it. It must not be sitting either in your file or in your workbook as a white elephant. You engage with it, because when you engage with the examination guideline, you are able to know per topic and per subtopic what are the things that you need to know. If you rely only on the textbooks sometimes they elaborate more than necessary. They give you a lot of flesh that you don't need for your metric examination. So you use your examination guideline. This is just one portion of our examination guideline on evolution. You will see that as we introduce evolution, we'll be looking at what we call biological evolution, and we will also be looking at the difference between hypothesis and theory, and you will also check evidence of evolution. And on the evidence of evolution, there's a lot of different things that we'll deliberate on. And you can see that we do have some of the indicators for evidence of evolution: fossil records and biogeography, modification by descent or homologous structures, and we also have genetics. These are the evidence of evolution that we're going to deliberate on. And later on, you are going to look at variation. Later on, you look at variation, and there are different types of variation. In fact, there are causes of variation, and those causes of variation are, amongst many, we have meiosis, which is not sounding Greek to you because you have done meiosis as a chapter, and under meiosis, you know about crossing over that brings about variation. And you also have got random arrangement of chromosomes. Oh, wow, this is beautiful. So can you see that there's a link between other chapters and what we are doing now? Remember, do not study life sciences grade 12 ATP or syllabus in isolation. There is always a link. So find the link and it's going to make your life very easy. We also have mutations and random fertilization and random mating. All these, they result in variations. There are different types of variations. We have what we call continuous variation and discontinuous variation. But wait, you are going to hear more about these variations later. Can you see that it is very easy when you work with the examination guideline? Because as you see that you have done the topic with your teacher, or when you study, you just tick to indicate that that is done. And you also tick, and as you do your revision, you go back to your main book, which is your main guidance or guider, and you check that you have covered everything that needs to be asked in the examination. Okay, let's now look at biological evolution. Biological evolution. And let us see what this is all about. Biological evolution is a process. So you can check that this process is either gradual. You know, something that is gradual, it's, if you say, I am gradually going to grasp evolution, it means that it's not going to happen rapid. You don't wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden you understand the theories of evolution. It's a gradual process. So biological evolution is a process which either is gradual or rapid in modern times, by which populations you can see, and just for us to remind each other, population is that group of organisms of the same species. And what about them? They are found in the same place and they at the same time. So it's the same place at the same time, and it's a group of similar species, right? And what happens now? Change. So in other words, by which populations change over time into different or more complex form in response to a change in their immediate environment. I want you to remember that when organisms gradually or rapidly change, the influence is where they are found. Their environment has got much of influence on their change itself. This means that all present day forms, what we have today of life, have descended from, so it's basic coming from and are related to those that lived in the past. So somehow there's a link, hey, that whatever lived in the past gradually underwent change until today's or the present world of a modern life where we are today. We see what is most recent. This is a simple example. You can see that we have got horses that are showing you from primitive ones. You can see, oh, look at the shape itself. And I want you to see how change is happening. By the way, what is influencing the change, class? It is the environment. So you can see that from Eohippus, we are moving up and we are moving up, we are moving up. Somebody is saying, oh, madam, the terms that are using there, they are so complicated. That's the joy of being a life science learner, hey? Because there's a lot of new stuff that we explore. But I wanted to look at Eohippus and look at the modern horse. Can you see that there have been a lot of change? And of course, because of the environment, there are factors that push the change to happen. But these factors, me and you, we don't decide. The environment will decide on those factors. Interesting, isn't it? I want us to unpack evidence for evolution. When we looked at the examination guideline, we have just tapped on the evidence for evolution, but now we are going to go into details about what is it that proves that evolution has occurred. So we have got what we call fossil records. Fossil records. What are fossils? Fossils are the remains of what existed in the past. So if you find bones, for example, that are stuck in some rocks, those are fossils, because whatever is petrified there, if we speak about petrified, some of you might be saying, oh ma'am, now you're talking something else, because in English, petrified means you are very scared. But petrified in life sciences might mean that they have been compressed and they are part of either the imprint or their remains are caught up between the rocks and they are the remains. That's why we speak about fossils. And there is one example. You can see this is the fossil, and where do you find it? It's on the rock. So it's either they die and they cement in and they leave evidence for evolution. So in other words, by the way, what do we call a person that studies fossils? It's you should be knowing by now because you have looked at this in grade 10. That's a paleontologist. And the study of fossils is paleontology. Okay? So paleontologist. Oh, yes, I got it right. Be careful with spelling. Learners have got a tendency. Does spelling count, madam? Yes, spelling count all the way. Let us also look at another evidence of evolution. We've got biogeography. Biogeography. If I were to use like in simple geography language, something that is biogeography has to do with the environment or a biome or a place. And in geography, you learn about the world, you learn about the climate, you learn about sometimes the different types of organisms that are found. Oh, I don't want to go deep in geography because I'm a life science teacher, by the way, but you should understand better because some of you might be doing geography as well. So in biogeography, I wanted to check. I'm not going to go into details now, but you can see that they are showing us different parts or different pieces of, you can see this is Africa, and we have got Australia, we have South America, and you can also see that there are organisms that are found. The ostriches are found, and you can see they are different, etc. I am not going to go into details now because we are going to unpack this now. Then we've got what we call homologous structures. Homologous structures, it's also what we call a modification by descent. Modification by descent. To modify. Modify means changing into so that there is more sense in what is happening, or there is more change or requested or expected change that will happen. So we've got homologous structures, and on homologous structures, I want you to look at this. Again, we'll go into details later, but just have a look at this. So in our homologous structures, we do have these, and somehow these structures, they are having the same kind of bones which have been modified to allow organisms to perform what they are supposed to perform best in terms of either climbing the trees or swimming in the ocean or to fly, you know. So there is modification in the structures themselves. Then we have genetics. Genetics, you can say a lot, Musa, because it's that long chapter with a lot of marks as well in genetics. We are going to be unpicking on genetics, how genetics influence the change. But me and you, by now, we know you can relate to this structure. And what is this? This is the DNA, and that's why we've got genes, and that is why we're talking about genetics. So in other words, if you are asked to mention, because sometimes the examiner can say state 4 evidence for evolution, or 3, or whatever number it is, who can say it's fossil records, and what's the other one? Biogeography, and we have got homologous structures or modification by descent, and we have genetics. Please remember with your classmates or study mates, this is now towards examination. You must be focused. You must have people that you focus with, and as you study for your exams. So as you study randomly during break, when you are enjoying the sun, if it's cold, just say, give me 4 evidence for evolution, and they can decide. In that way, practice always makes perfect. If we look at the brief explanation of each of the evidence of evolution, we have got fossil records, we have spoken about that. We have biogeography, that is genetic evidence. We also have cultural evidence. Let us look at fossil records, we have spoken about that. That anatomy, the makeup of the bone structure. Anatomically, features of fossils are examined and compared and placed in sequence from the most simple to the more complex one. I want to mention something about transitional species. Transitional species, I will not dwell much on this, because when you do human evolution, you are going to talk about transitional species. But just in a simpler term, what is this? It means that those organisms, what will happen to them? They are displaying characteristics in between those that it follows and those that it precedes. So in other words, if this gradual change is happening, somewhere in between, we've got our transitional species, which is representing the modern world or the modern organism with the one that existed before the one that we call the transitional species. Biogeography, we are, as I indicated to you, is the location. So we are talking about current location. Hey, be careful, learners. I'm not talking about the townships, because normally we call our townships locations. But here we're talking about a specific place where organisms are found, of closely related species, as an indication of how they may have evolved from a common ancestor. Please check this out, because this will keep popping a lot. Common ancestry, common ancestor, meaning that diversity has occurred. But somehow at the beginning, there was this common ancestry, and then evolution allowed the other branches to come forth. And that is why we now have got different species that exist. Mark this. Biogeography may be linked to continental drift and speciation. I will talk about a continental drift now, but speciation, on terminology, we spoke about it's the formation of new species. And when we look at genetic evidence, this is now talking about our DNA. You saw that double helix structure of DNA, and we are looking at similarities and differences between genetic composition And then DNA of species shows relatedness between species and their possible evolution from a common ancestor. You can see common ancestor is there on regular basis. It keeps on popping because in evolution we are saying that, you know what, we did not change to become something else. But because there's common ancestry, there's a lot of common characteristics that we can see from the diverse species that exist in the present time. Cultural evidence, the increasing complexity of items such as artifacts and tools are an indication of the advances or evolution of the human intellect. You know, in the past, organisms would just eat raw food, for example, but today, there's if I want to cut my meat, I have a knife that I can use, but that is from the advancement of human intellect part of their development. Remember, our high flyers learners, this flesh that we are giving you is the flesh that you can fill in when you are asked about explain questions or define questions, because that is where you find the question has got 3 marks, 4 marks, depending on the decision of the examiner. So in other ways, for you to know, you need to understand how to deliberate on each one of them. As we have indicated earlier on, the fossil records, we've got different types of fossils. We have those ones that are preserved in natural matter. You can see this one looks so alive. It looks like a fly, but it was stuck maybe in one of the sap for a tree, and it was preserved there. But then looking at how old that tree is, and it is easy for evolutionists to find out, reading the information to say, how long ago did this organism exist? We do have our living fossils, we have got mineralized fossils, we have got a mold or a cast fossils. All these are our fossil records, and they help to analyze and come to a conclusion, because we spoke about hypothesis and theory. Hypothesis is just a scientific guess, but a theory is something that has been looked into and there is some kind of agreement on it. If you check here for the fossil records, we do have got, I mentioned earlier on, rocks. Just check this out. This is looking great. You can see here, this is so interesting. You can see that, you can even figure out that this was a reptile. It had a long tail, you can see, but all this is now found in it's petrified, or it's stuck there, and it can be analyzed. You can see these are fossils, you can see these are fossils, you can see, as we indicated previously, that we have got living fossils, we have got those that are trapped inside some sap of trees, etc. But interesting enough, I want you to look at this. So this is different, we call them strata of layers. In other words, so when evolution occurs, the organisms that lived long time ago, as the soil covers them, they are there. And later on, there's another layer that follows. Then there's another layer, and another layer, and another layer. So checking this arrow is telling us, this arrow that's going up is telling us about the time. So right here, this is our oldest rock. And you can see that there are leaves, plant leaves that are trapped and they are petrified there. And you see this one here, it's not as old as this level here. And we go up just like that, and we go up just like that, and we come here. This is our new West rocks. So evolutionists, what they do, and paleontologists, they will come and check the levels of the different strata, and they can depict that those ones that existed in the past are the ones that are found lower down into the oldest strata of the rocks. The oldest rock strata are found deepest in the earth, while the youngest rocks occur near the surface. This we just discussed. And fossils of the organisms found in the deepest strata therefore lived on Earth much longer ago than those species that are fossilized near the surface. This is easy. But wait until they ask you to deliberate. This is easy stuff. So you play with your words, but use your life science terminology more in order to get your maximized marks. Biogeography. This is about, you see, geography I told you, and biogeography, and this is now talking about our planet. Let's check this out. During the Permian period, and when was this? 250 million years ago, during the Permian period. You have done your geological time scale in grade 10. So once we speak about era or period, it's not Greek to you. In the past, all continents were joined to form one land mass. And because it was one land mass, see, this is the one land mass that we have. And because it was one land mass, it was possible for any mass to move across this large landmass. There was no problem. They could move anywhere they want. They can be found here. They can move to this end. They can move to that end. And plants could spread across the landmass as well. You see now maybe there are seeds and the wind blows and they land in a different place. Then they will spread. You'll find the same species in the entire landmass. And now this one big landmass is called Pangea. We call it Pangea. Then something happened. During now the Triassic period, right? And that is, I wanted to check the timeline. It's now, this happened in 200 million years ago. During this period now, check. Okay, now we have got two main land masses. In the beginning, we had one. Then now we have got two. And animals and plants on the northern land mass were separated from those on the south. You can see now that there is two land masses that are formed. So we have this separated, this part here is separated from this part here. And the good thing is that those two land masses, they also have their names. And the name of one part is called Laurasia, and we have what we call Gondwana land. These are our land masses that have been formed. So the Pangea had divided. You can see here now there's water covering the entire place and water separating these two land masses, meaning that the organisms and the organisms, animals and plants that are found here, they are only found here. But now here we have got others that are found there. But there's something I'll talk to you about soon. Then we're moving to our most recent time, and this is 65 million years ago. It was during the Cretaceous period. Present day position of continents. So we know today that there are continents, and maybe we did not know what caused the continents. Continents were caused by the continental drift, splitting the big Pangea mass into two masses, which were Laurasia and Gondwana land, and further continental drift separating Gondwana land into continents and also separating Laurasia into continents. So during the movement of continents, some parts sank below the oceans and other parts rose up to form mountains. Because yes, there are rivers, we've got islands, and we've got mountains. It was during that process of the big shift of the continents that created the changes. If you check now, 65 million years ago, this is what we have. So we have got Africa, there's our Africa, and we have got South America, we have got Australia, there is India, etc., etc. These are the fragments, not as small as a fragment of bread, but in terms of the Earth surface, that we ended up having the continents. And what is interesting about these continents is because biogeography will explain to you that organisms that are found here, some of them were found here, and they were found here. So as the continental drift occurred, some organisms moved to Australia and some to South America. They did not move and cross the oceans. No, get this right. They shifted with the continents and they are found there. And that on its own is taking us back to what? That's something that I said you must always remember: common ancestry. Modification by descent. By the way, you know that this is what we call homologous. Homologous structures. So if you find modification, if you write in the examination modification by descent, or you write homologous structures, you still get a mark because it's one and the same thing. Let us just have a look at this. Interesting, isn't it? So what we have here, we have got the humans. This is a human being, and there's a horse. We've got a whale, and there's a turtle. We have frogs, and we've got birds. But check this out. From all of them, look at the human. Look at the structure that is found on the human. And look at the one for the horse. Just like that, I want you to check the one that is found for the flying bird. Look at the one for the frog. Can you see that there are similarities? They are similar. We'll just go deep now into what kind of similarities do we see and why. So homologous structures, as similar organisms adapted to different environments, the function of their appendages changed, result of descent with modification from a common ancestor. Common ancestry is the way to go, because we keep tapping there to say something was common and the ancestor was common, and there was now change in terms of the different, as indicated earlier on, different environments. So if you check here, all these organisms that we have looked at, humans, for example, they have got humerus. This is the long bone that we have, that's a humerus. And we've got radius, which is the radius, and we have got ulna, and we've got metacarpals, and these are the phalanges. But let us check what we have on the bird, for example. You see, there is similarity. This is now the humerus, and we have got the radius, and the ulna is hidden somewhere here. That's the ulna, and we have got metacarpals, and these are the phalanges. The same thing applies to here. You can see that they were modified, but they do have the same. It's basically, you see, and then you can see you've got the metacarpals and the phalanges are here. So basically, they because of the different environment, they had to evolve, to change, so that the birds are able to do what? To fly. And the whale, where do you find whales? Whales, they are found in the oceans. They're able to move in water. And the human beings, the adaptation is what? We are able to have our free hands, where we can carry objects, we can carry food, we can carry our children, etc., etc. See now, the bird's arms became wings to flap. Human's arms is used to pick up or to grasp, and a horse arm became a foreleg to run on. So each and every organism needed this adaptation so that they are able to survive. Modification of skeletons by descent is therefore evidence to support the theory of evolution. Once you see this humerus, you see the radius, you see the ulna, you can see that there is common ancestry. There's no need for you to go and memorize the names of the bones. The names of the bones are mentioned to you so you can see the similarities in different organisms. Now, genetics. Somebody's excited because we have done genetics, just in terms of our genes, the DNA. Organisms pairs. So here, this table here is showing us different pairs of organisms. And this is also showing us the number of amino acid differences. So what we have here, just to explain to you, between human and chimpanzee, if you take between human and chimpanzee, what is the difference? The number of amino acids. What are amino acids? Amino acids are the monomers of proteins. They are the building blocks of proteins. So, and you know that amino acids, they are proteins, and we're speaking about our DNA. So between humans and chimpanzee, there's basically zero. There's no difference at all. It's zero. And if you check between human and rhesus monkey, it's only one amino acid difference. But there's something that made me even to laugh. I mean, look at human and screwworm fly. Only 27 amino acid difference. Like I said, sure, this lineage is so, it's so close that a human being and a fly might just have a difference of only 27 amino acids. Sure. Look at human and horse. Human and horse, the difference is 12. So we can go on and on and on. The differences are there, and it simply means that we do have common ancestry somewhere along the way. The more similar the nucleotide, I hope you remember the nucleotide. These are the monomers of nucleic acids. Sequence of organisms are, the more closely related these organisms are. There is about 97%, I want you to check this out, 97% similarity between the sequence of DNA of a human and a chimpanzee, and 99 similarities with other humans. So 99% is basically almost 100%. This suggests that humans are more closely related to each other than any other animal, but more closely related to chimpanzees than mice, for example. So you can see that in terms of how evolution has occurred, the organisms, how they split, this one is more closer to that than the other one in terms of the number of, or the nucleotide sequence that we see or have. Therefore, as per indication earlier on, what do we share? We share a common ancestor. I want you to be looking at the questions which we are going to deliberate, and in the interim, just go for your comfort break, make it snappy. We don't have the luxury of time. We are meeting soon. Welcome back, grade 12s. I am excited that I saw some of you never really ran to the bathrooms, but what you were doing, you were engaging with this question. That shows a lot of interest. So this question here is saying the map below shows fossils found on different land masses. So you can see that we've got, as we indicated, the biogeography story, the formation of different continents. Now it's showing us the different fossils. I wanted to check this as you find it in the examination paper. You check all the information that is given to you. So there are names that are given. It's a fossil of a fern. They give you a name. We've got this fossilia. They give you all the names. You check. Acclimatize yourself with a diagram or a map or whatever before you attempt answering the questions. Then the first question is that name the supercontinent from which the land masses shown on the map had originated. You know that we had Laurisia and Gondwana land. And what is the indication for you? You check now, oh, there's South America, we've got Africa. And which part of it, of the landmass do they come from? You and me should be knowing by now. And what is the answer there? Excellent, it's Gondwana land, because this is now the southern part of the continent. Then from the map, you now check the map, identify two reptiles common to both Africa and South America. Mark reptiles. Learners get excited and sometimes they go offline because they answer wrong things. You are asked to identify two reptiles found both in Africa and South America. Which are the two reptiles? The two reptiles are Sinognathus and Mesosaurus. How do you find this? You go back to the key and you say, I've got Sinognathus, here they are. Come check on the map. Do you see something similar here? Yes, I see Sinognathus in South America. I also see Cytognathus in Africa. And the same thing applies to Mesosaurus. And question number B, name two land masses on which Lystrosaurus had existed. So you are now going to identify. How do you look? You check this one because this is the reptile that is Lystrosaurus. You now come to the actual land masses and see if you can get. We are only looking for two, and where can we get them? We can get them in Africa, India, or Antarctica. Ish, you see now, me and my stories. Right. If you check here, you'll see in Africa, that's where we have our Lystrosaurus. And if you check here in India, we have that as well. So they were asking about the land masses. Then from the same map, state the phenomenon related to the Earth's history that the fossil data shown on the map supports. And what is it that this one supports? It supports something that we all know, and is that the land masses were once joined and over time had split apart, and this is continental drift that had taken place. So when continents drift apart, some of the reptiles and some of the fossils of ferns were found in different pieces of the continent. This question here, the present day distribution of three closely related species of the dog family, the coyote, jackal, and dingo is shown on the world map below. We have the world map below. And what type of evidence for evolution is represented here? Everybody can sing together because you know what it is. And that is biogeography. Good. So now we understand because we have drilled a lot on it. And what is a biological species? Here you are expected to define. And this is similar organisms that can interbreed to produce fertile offspring. This is a good definition. Then our homologous structures. The diagram below shows the structure of the four limbs of different species. We have spoken a lot about it. Name the line of evidence for evolution represented by the diagram. Everybody knows now this is modification by descent or homologous structures. and describe how the line of evidence mentioned in question 1 supports the theory of evolution. You are describing, and your description is going to be, although different species have similar bones, structure or body plan, these structures are adapted to perform different functions, indicating a common ancestry. I hope you understand the common ancestry story now. This question here is on potos and lemurs are small mammals. Scientists believe that the potos and lemurs share a common ancestor that existed in Africa. Presently, potos occur in Africa, while lemurs are only found in Madagascar. Madagascar is an island off the east coast of Africa, as shown in the diagram. Question 1, explain how continental drift could have affected the distribution of common ancestor for 4 marks. It is an explaining question. There was once a large continent, and the common ancestor existed through the continent. When Madagascar separated, the common ancestor was found in both regions. You have your easy 4 marks. This question here, is scientists compare the number of differences in amino acid sequence to see how closely related species are. Fewer differences in amino acid sequence means species are more closely related. Here we have got species A, B, and C. And you need to look at the table. You see species A, we've got 11, species C, there's 3, and species B, we've got 10. What type of evidence for evolution is being used in this table? Everybody knows it's genetic evidence. Then we have got this one table here, which is showing us the differences in amino acids sequence of the protein albumin in 4 species of primates. You also study, don't just look at this, you study, and you can see, for example, that monkey to monkey, what is the difference? It's 0. And gibbons to gibbons, that's also 0. But you can see that gibbons to monkey is a 32. Which 2 species are likely to have separated most recently according to the results on the table? And what is our answer? So you check between humans and monkeys, and you check gorillas to gibbons, gibbons to monkeys, and gorillas to humans. And our answer there is D. It is the gorillas and humans. So you check, we've got gorillas and we've got humans, right? And this is giving us 8, and that is the most recent separation that has occurred. And on that note, we are going to now allow Vedika Maharaj to take you through more of theories of evolution.
Welcome back, grade 12s. My name is Vedika Maraj and I'm going to be completing this lesson with you. Thank you to my colleague Tiniko Vuma for doing such a great job. Now we're moving on to the sources of variation, and these sources of variation are within a species. So what do we mean when we talk about variation? So you actually did hear about this before when we did meiosis, okay? And then you saw during meiosis that the gametes that are formed, they are different. They are not the same like in mitosis. In mitosis, the cells that are formed after cell division are identical. But during meiosis, they are different. And that variation is what we are talking about. So there are three sources of variation that we are going to look at. And these are also form part of our evidence of evolution. Number one, we have mutations. What are mutations? This is also a recap from genetics. It's a sudden, unexpected change in the genetic structure or DNA of a cell. Okay, so in this instance, you'll see we did it when we did genetics. You did it more specifically when you did DNA. And then you saw here that there's a code. And then all of a sudden, something happens. And in this instance, there's a replacement of a single nucleotide. And this can cause an incorrect amino acid to be put, which causes an incorrect protein or a different protein. And sometimes it can actually not cause any effect. But if it does cause an effect, this is a mutation. We have a few questions here in between to go through. Some of it is on the evidence of evolution, which is this one over here. Let's quickly go through it. Evidence of hominid cultural evolution can be found in the fossil record. That would include so cultural evidence. Whenever you see cultural evidence, you should think of stone tools, you should think of paintings, okay? Those are normally your guides. So let's look. Which one is talking about that? It is D, the presence of stone tools. Variation within a species is introduced through, okay, so these are the different ones. We haven't gone through all of them yet. However, you should have done this in class already. So let's see if you're able to answer. Variation within a species is introduced through random mating and asexual reproduction, mitosis and random fertilization, random mating and random fertilization, and mitosis and meiosis. So we already said that mitosis is the one that causes identical cells to be formed. So therefore, it cannot be B and D. Right, let's look at the other two. Random mating. Yes, random mating could be a source of variation, right? Because it's not determined, it's not predetermined, it's random. And then the other one is random fertilization, but we are going to talk about these two, then I'll explain it to you better. The answer is C, random mating and random fertilization. Study the list of processes below. We have mutation, DNA replication, meiosis, random fertilization. Which of the following processes are regarded as a source of variation for evolution? Okay, so once again, we are still busy doing them, but you should know them by now. It would be mutation, the one that we just saw, then meiosis, which is the one that I mentioned, and then random fertilization. So the answer is B. Right, so let's explain these a little bit better. So number one, we spoke about mutations that occur, right, within the DNA sequence. Then the second one is meiosis. So meiosis causes genetic variation in gametes. This results in offspring that are better adapted to a particular environment and ensures that they will have a better chance of survival. Why? Because they're adapted to the environment, they're able to thrive there, they're able to live there, therefore they have a higher chance of survival. And there are two processes that actually result in this. It is the crossing over results in the recombinant chromatids exchange of maternal and paternal DNA. And then we also have random arrangement of chromosomes in metaphase 1. Now, I just want to stop here and remind you, what do these things mean? So let's remember meiosis. What happened in meiosis is this process of crossing over. Okay? So where we have an exchange of genetic material. This exchange happens between the paternal and the maternal chromosomes. Okay, so that's going to cause variation. Why? Because now we're getting some genetics from the paternal side and we're getting some genes from the maternal side. So that's how we are causing variation. How does random arrangement result in variation? When we talk about random arrangement at the equator, we are talking about the position of the chromosome. So as you know, that during metaphase 1, we have homologous chromosomes on either side of the equator, the paternal and the maternal. But it is not determined, we don't know whether the paternal will be on the top side or the bottom side. It can be in any order. Okay, that's why we say it's random arrangement. So the maternal can either be at the top or the bottom, and same with the paternal. Also the sequence, you know that the chromosomes are numbered, but they don't necessarily have to be in that sequence at the equator, as long as they are in homologous pairs. So how does this cause variation? Because some of them, the paternal is going to be on the one side, the others on the maternal. So when they divide during anaphase 1, they are going to go to 2 different cells, and that's how we are going to have variation. Then we have random fertilization. This is a chance process, and we cannot be sure which sperm will fertilize which ovum. So every month an ovum is released, and then whenever sexual intercourse takes place, sperm cells will be released. But there's no way to determine which ovum is going to be fertilized and which sperm cell is going to fertilize that ovum. All the sperm produced by the male are different, and all the ova produced by a female are different. Therefore, the offspring produced by these parents will be different. If there are 4 sperm cells and 4 ova, there would be 16 possible zygotes. Okay, then we have also random mating between organisms within a species. So mating can only occur within a species, okay, but it is also random. Okay, so these are all ways that it can cause variation. So then we did the other questions. I think now you'll understand it better. Here we have a continuation of one of the questions that were done earlier. Here we need to give the letter of the species A, B, and C that should appear at positions 1, 2, and 3 in the diagram below. Okay, so here we have, if we have to look at it, how do we work this out? So we have a common ancestor, and here we have the first branch. Okay, and then what we understand is that this one and this one are more closely related compared to 1 and 3. So I'll say that again. 1 and 2 are more closely related to each other, with here being the common ancestor, and 1 and 2 are not as closely related to 3. So when we have to look at A, B, and C, let's have a look at it. Which one do you think is the furthest away? B is definitely the one that it has more differences, right, in the amino acid sequence. Therefore, I would say that B would be here at position 3. And then A and C, they only have a difference of 3, which means that they are more closely related. So this would be A and this would be C. Or you can even say swap these two around. That would also be acceptable, because we don't have information to determine whether A is exactly, whether 1 is exactly A or C. But we do know that they are together on that side. The amino acid sequence of hemoglobin molecules are routinely used to determine how closely related different species are to each other. The following table shows the amino acid sequence of a small portion of hemoglobin of various species. Okay, assuming that the amino acid sequence is the same for the rest of the molecule, which 2 species are most closely related? Okay, so they are saying here that this is the sequence. So you know, if they are more closely related, that means that the sequence is the same. So let's look, which 2 are the same over here? You will see that it's this one and this one, the human and the chimpanzee. Why? Because we have LYS, GLU, HIS, ISO. And if you look at this one, it is exactly the same. Therefore, the answer is human and chimpanzee. So whenever you have to look at this, you always have to see the ones that are more closely related to each other are the ones that are going to have the same or very similar sequence. Right. Now we also get continuous and discontinuous variation. This is still got to do with variation now. Okay. So when we look at continuous variation, this is characteristics where there is a range of intermediate phenotypes. What do we mean by that? We mean that there are not distinct categories. For example, Height, there's a range of different heights. Yes, we normally say somebody's tall or somebody's short, but the reality of the matter is that you can either be 1.62, 1.65, 1.55, 1.57. There's a range. That is what we mean by intermediate phenotypes. And you do know this from genetics. Weight is the same. Skin color is the same. There's a different range, different type of skin color. There are different shades of brown, of lighter colors, of darker colors. And then hair color the same. So that is why we say that it is continuous variation. And this is, so those are showing us the examples of this. Then we have discontinuous variation. These characteristics fall into distinct categories. For example, blood groups. You are either blood type A, blood type B, blood type O, or blood type AB. You can't really be a combination, right? Unless you are blood type AB, where you are A and B, right? But that's a separate blood group. It's a distinct blood group. Okay, it's not that you are part A and part B, you are AB. So it's a distinct category. Tongue rolling. You can either roll your tongue or you can't. Okay, so that is also a distinct category. Earlobes are either attached or unattached. Gender is also another one where it's either yes, gender is another one where it's either male or female. So this is just a graph that is showing you the different things that you can be asked on continuous and discontinuous variation. So we spoke a lot about them. There's a lot of different examples there for you, other examples. But the main thing I want to focus on here is the last 2 points. This one. So continuous variation is going to be represented in a line graph because it's going to give you a range, right? So with a line graph, you can like plot more closer figures and values. Whereas with the bar graph, you have distinct categories. Okay, so the bar graph is showing you distinct categories. So that's how you're going to these are the graphs that are going to represent these two sources of variation, these two variations. And it's controlled by in continuous variation, a lot of gene and environment, range of phenotypes between two extremes, and the discontinuous is limited number of phenotypes with no intermediates. Okay, but the main thing I want you to focus on the slide is the representation of the graphs and the examples. Right, now we're done with the sources of variation, and also in between we did some lovely questions that consolidates everything that we've been doing so far. Now we move on to the second part of this session, and this is the one where we talk about the ideas of evolution. Okay, so you spoke about what evolution is. We discussed the different the evidence for evolution, and you saw that there's definitely evidence that this exists. But now let's go through a little bit of the history. What are the theories behind evolution? How did this come about? Who were the different scientists that came up with these things many years ago? Okay, and so we are going to look at Lamarck, which has a Lamarckism idea, and then we have Charles Darwin with his Darwinism idea. We are going to discuss it. I just want you to notice at this point here, look how far back this was. Okay, so Lamarck came up with his theory before Darwin, but I just want you to notice, look at it's 1744 to 1829 and 1809 to 1882. Okay, a long time ago. So we're going to look at these. We're going to look at Lamarck's two laws, and we're going to look at Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection, and then we're going to look at the formation of a new species. Okay, and once again, I'm just showing you this to show you the importance of your examination guideline. The examination guideline has the scope of how much you need to study, what you need to study. It's even got definitions in it, and it's got descriptions. I want to just bring that point to you here. This one is, I hope you have your examination guideline in front of you. If you don't, you can go back to this video and then check. I want you to please put a star next to Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection, because if you are asked in the exam to describe this process, it's going to come exactly from here. I'm going to show you it. We're going to go through it. Don't worry. I just want you to indicate it in your exam guideline. The other thing I want you to indicate is about speciation through geographic isolation. This is another one. If they ask you to describe it, you are going to describe it word for word from the examination guideline. But you must also be able to apply these descriptions to any given scenario in the examination. Okay. So if you are asked, if they give you a specific scenario about a particular organism and you need to apply the information given to you, then you are going to use this template and you are going to make it specific to that question. But if they just ask you for a description of natural selection, you are going to give it word for word without an example, like the examination guideline. The other thing I want to mention to you here, very important, what is a biological species? And I want you to go and I want you to learn what is the difference between a species and what is the difference between a species and a population. Okay. So species or a biological species, there are similar organisms that are capable of interbreeding to produce fertile offspring. And the population is a group of these organisms of one species. A group of them is called a population. Okay, right. So let's get into it. So we have Lamarck. Okay, he had the first theory of evolution, and his name was Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, and this was in the early 1800s. He explained evolution using two laws. The two laws, the number one was the law of use and disuse, and number two, the inheritance of acquired characteristics. So the law of use and disuse as an organism, so basically what he's saying here is that the more an organism uses a particular structure or organ more regularly, the more they use it, it becomes more developed and enlarged. And if an organism does not use a structure or an organ frequently, it becomes less developed and reduced in size and may disappear altogether. Okay? So he's saying the more you use something, the bigger it will get. The less you use it, the smaller it can get, and it can actually disappear altogether. His second part, which is related to the first part, is that this acquired characteristic, so this characteristic that came in this lifetime by overuse or by not using it, that characteristic is then going to be passed down to the offspring. So that is what we mean by acquired. Acquired is something that was developed during the life of the individual. It is an acquired characteristic and it can be passed down to the offspring. Okay, now let's think about it. Let's put it in practical terms. Do you think that this is possible? Let's use an example of weight training, right? Or resistance training. So now you are lifting weights and you are building muscle. That's an acquired characteristic. You have built muscle now. So then, are you going to pass that down to your offspring? Right? Let's just think about it. Okay. So in this instance, he used this theory of his approach. He also looked at the giraffe. So this, if you look at it, it can be a little bit convincing. Let's go through it and let's see. So what he said was that once upon a time, all giraffes had short necks. So what do you know about giraffes? Giraffes have tall necks, right? Yes, but he believed that once upon a time, giraffes had short necks. And they frequently had to stretch their necks to reach the leaves of tall trees. And that caused their necks to become longer. The characteristic of the long necks was acquired. Okay? So this is the use and disuse law. And then he spoke about it became acquired and then passed on to the next generation, forming offspring with longer necks than the generation before. So that is what he said. But this was rejected. Okay, it was rejected. Why was it rejected? It was rejected because there was no evidence that the acquired characteristics are inherited by the offspring. Okay, organisms did not evolve because they were determined to change, but the changes took place randomly and mainly due to mutations. That is something that we also need to understand, that I've noticed that grade 12s do not understand. Okay, is that these occur randomly and there are mutations that occur. Yes, the environment influences it. Remember, Tiniko spoke about that. The environment influences this. But what changes? It's the mutation that occurs. There's a change in the genetic makeup. That is what happens. But back in Lamarck's times, remember that time, it was long, long time ago, they didn't even understand about genes and about inheritance. Okay. Number 3, an organism cannot change its DNA. It cannot willfully change its DNA. According to Mendel, it is the genotype that determines the phenotype, not the other way around. Okay, so it's your genes that's going to determine what you're going to physically look like, or the physical appearance. Okay, that is on the genotype, and not the phenotype that determines the genes. Right, then along came Darwin. Darwin's theory was different. Okay, it was different from Lamarck. He said he had a theory of natural selection. Okay, and he had a book which was published in 1859 that was called The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. So what he believed was that species were not created in their present form, but evolved from ancestral species. Like, let's look at the whale evolution. I think that's one of the ones that he was looking at as well. So he's saying that this is what it originally looked at. Look at that whale. That whale looks like a big rodent. It has 4 legs. It has a long tail, and then it evolved over time. So what he's saying is that they did not originate on Earth as this whale as we know it now. Okay, they evolved from ancestral species. Then we have proposed the mechanism for evolution, which was natural selection. What are they saying in natural selection? He says that there is a great deal of variation among the offspring. That is one of the main things about Darwin. Okay, I just want to put all of these up because it's much easier for me to explain. Okay, so what Darwin says was that there was variation in a species. There were some that had favorable characteristics, and there's some that did not. Okay, and what we're talking about, favorable and unfavorable, it's got to do with the environment. Okay, favorable to the environment that they are in. When there is a change in the environmental conditions, or if there is a competition, then the organisms with the characteristics which make them more suited survive. And the organisms that are unfavorable, with unfavorable characteristics, which make them less suited, they die. The organisms that survive are going to reproduce. So they are going to pass on the allele for that favorable characteristic to their offspring. The next generation will therefore have a higher proportion of individuals with the favorable characteristic. Now this is a mouthful, and there's a few things that I need to identify here with you. Firstly, how is Darwin different from Lamarck? Darwin believed that there's variation in the offspring, and Lamarck believed that everything was the same. Everyone was the same. Okay? And then they acquired a characteristic. So, what do we mean by this variation? So, what I mean by this is that there are different species. There are different characteristics within the species. Slight characteristics. Okay? And that variation, those characteristics are controlled by genes. So even though phenotypically they can have a particular gene, genotypically they can have an allele for the unfavorable. So if they are phenotypically having a favorable characteristic, they can have a gene or an allele, in their gene that is going to be unfavorable. So that is why it's very important that you have a allele here. If learners write this out and for natural selection in the exam for 7 marks, and they don't say the allele is passed down, they lose marks because it's an allele that's passed down. So it does not mean that, yes, that allele is going to be passed down for the favorable characteristic, but it doesn't mean that that offspring is going to have that phenotype. You know this, right, from genetics, that there are recessive alleles as well. But what it does mean is that this allele for the favorable characteristic will be passed down, and the next generation will have a higher proportion. They have more, a higher proportion of individuals with that favorable characteristic. So if they have the favorable and it shows in the phenotype, then they would have it. Okay, the unfavorable one dies out. Another point, you must talk about unfavorable characteristics or favorable characteristics. It's not the organism that is favorable or unfavorable. It is the characteristic. Okay, 12, it's very important that in life sciences you understand. It's very important in life sciences that you understand what is happening, because then it will help you to remember and not make silly mistakes that will cost you marks. Okay, so this is now an application of Darwinism. As you can see, 7-mark question. The malaria parasite is transmitted to human blood by mosquitoes. People living in malaria-affected areas take anti-malarial drugs to prevent infection. If the anti-malarial drugs are effective, there should be no parasite in their blood. The presence of parasites even after treatment indicates that they have evolved to be drug resistant. Describe how malaria parasite developed drug resistance through natural selection. So this is called evolution in present times. Okay, so this is where we can actually see evolution happening in front of our eyes. So what happens here is that firstly you must know variation. There was variation. These are the pointers that you need to know. There was variation in the malaria parasite population. You need to say that. You cannot just say there was variation. That is too generic. Now you are applying it to a specific question. Excuse me. Some parasites were resistant to the anti-malarial drugs and others were not. Okay, so you don't say unfavorable and favorable characteristics here. You say the characteristic. When the parasites were exposed to the anti-malarial drugs, those that were not drug resistant did not survive. So this is the variation. This is the different, excuse me, I just need to drink some water. These are the favorable and unfavorable characteristics. And then those that were not drug resistant did not survive and they died. So the ones that were exposed to let's start again. There was variation in the population of the malaria parasite population. Some parasites were resistant to the anti-malarial drugs and some were not. Those are the favorable and unfavorable conditions. Then the parasites were exposed to the anti-malarial drugs. And the ones that were not drug resistant, they did not survive. They died because now it killed them. But there were ones that were resistant, and those survived and reproduced. And they passed the allele for the drug resistance to their offspring. Okay, so the next generation had a higher proportion of parasites with drug resistance. So we said variation, favorable, unfavorable characteristics, introduce the competition or the environment that changed. The ones with the favorable survived, the one with unfavorable characteristics died, and then the allele was passed down, and mention the allele for which characteristic that was passed down. Okay, very, very important. Please go back and listen to this if you don't get it now. Okay, this is a lovely question that you can do with your teacher. Okay, it's to study the three sources of variation. Oh, we can do it quickly. It's quick. The three sources of variation. We have random arrangement of chromosomes and we have meiosis. With meiosis, we have crossing over, random mating, random fertilization, and mutations. Okay, those are your sources of variation. So you can, I always do it like this, CRMMM. This is for crossing over, random arrangement. Sorry, this is another R and another R. So it's CR, random arrangement, random fertilization, random mating, and mutation. CRRM. Okay, that is going to remind you for the sources of variation. Explain why the above example represent discontinuous variation. Okay, so this is this example that are here. In this example, they had deer that are either black or white, and there is no intermediate characteristic. So they tell you here that they're either black or white. You can even see the pictures as well. They are either black or white, so it's discontinuous variation. This is a question on Lamarck. Okay, read the extract below and answer the questions which follow. This is about the stickleback fish. You can see a picture of it over here. There are small fish found in the ocean of freshwater lakes. The ones in the ocean have spiky fins for protection against predators. Until about 10,000 years ago, most stickleback fish lived in the ocean. But when the last ice age ended, the melting ice created new lakes, and some populations swam into the lakes. The connection between the ocean and the lakes eventually dried up, trapping the stickleback populations in some lakes for thousands of years. Over time, the stickleback fish populations in the lakes lost the spiky fins. So when they were in the ocean, they had spiky fins because they needed to have it there. And when they were in the lakes, they noticed now that 10,000 years later, they did not have it. Okay? How would Lamarck have explained the absence of the spiky fins? So he says they were in the ocean. When they were in the lake, they weren't there. How would he explain it? So what is the first thing he would have said? All of them had spiky fins originally. The lakes, there were no predators. Okay? The fish did not need to use the spiky fins because they did not have predators anymore. And then they disappeared. The acquired characteristic of no spikes was passed down to the next generation. Okay, so you just mentioned that all of them were the same. You talk about the condition that changed, and you talk about how they used it more, they used it less, and then you say they disappeared or they enlarged, and then you mentioned that acquired characteristic, not the allele, the acquired characteristic was passed down. Eventually, all the fish had no spikes. Right, now we quickly go through punctuated equilibrium and gradualism. So gradualism is basically Darwin. Okay, Darwin is saying that this change that happened. So he says that we have a change in the species, right? But this change that happens over millions and thousands of years. It's a gradual change with little characteristics changing all the time. Whereas punctuated equilibrium is when we have stages of rapid change, and then we have followed by long periods of no change. So we have a species that is, say, let's look at color. It's a mouse that is white in color. Then all of a sudden, after it stays white for many years, then all of a sudden it changes to another color. That is our rapid change. And then we have stasis again, right? Equilibrium again, where they don't have a lot of change. Whereas in gradualism, they slowly change over time. Let's look at these butterflies or moths over here, right? Here we have can you see they gradually change in the colors? You see that. Whereas here we have rapid change. You can see orange, you can see brown, you can see white. Then we move on lastly to speciation. Okay, so speciation is the other one that I said that you need to know from your examination guideline, and you must be able to apply this to a new scenario that is given to you. You will be getting new scenarios in the exam, or you can be just asked to describe the general description. When we look at speciation, this is when we have the formation of a new species. So we're not here talking about like these little changes that occur over time. We are talking about a whole new species, right, being developed. So let's quickly go into it. If a population of a single species becomes separated by a geographical barrier, then the population splits into two. There is no gene flow between the two populations. Since each population may be exposed to different environmental conditions, the selection pressure may be different. Natural selection occurs independently in each of the two populations, and such that the individuals of two populations become very different from each other. They change genotypically and phenotypically. Even if the two populations were to mix again, they will not be able to interbreed. The two populations are now a different species. Okay, so to explain this in simple terms, there's a population of a species. There's a population, and then what is a population? I told you it is a group of organisms of the same species. So they are in a population. That population gets split by a geographical barrier, not the species. The species is not split. The population is split. Okay, so we have one species, the population gets split. So the population gets split by quite a large barrier, and then the environmental conditions change on either side. So when they change, those organisms are going to adapt by natural selection. Because what did you say about natural selection? Favorable characteristics, the allele for the favorable characteristic gets passed down, and then the ones with the unfavorable die. So when those conditions are there, the ones that are able to thrive in those conditions are going to survive, and they're going to reproduce, and they're going to pass the allele down to their offspring. And the ones that are not going to survive there, they die. Okay, so eventually over time they become genotypically and phenotypically different, and they are now, if they were put together again and forced to interbreed, they will not be able to interbreed, so they are now a new species. Right, then our last topic for today, selective breeding. So grade 12, for this topic, what you need to know the examples of a domesticated animal and a crop species for selective breeding or artificial selection. For ages, humans have been doing breeding experiments to develop organisms with a selected set of desirable characteristics. This is called artificial selection. So we spoke about how evolution has got to do with nature changing the environment. Nature is the one that is the driving force behind what happens in evolution. But with artificial selection, this is when humans have a desirable characteristic that they find desirable. So, for example, the lovely mealie that we eat today that we love was originally looking like this. This one is not so tasty, okay, and it doesn't have such big kernels. So then it got modified over years, artificially so by humans. Humans decided that we want bigger kernels, we want juicier kernels, we want bigger mealie. So they are the ones that did this process. And then the same with the dogs. The dogs we have today originated from the wolf species. Okay, so that is all we have today for the introduction and the theories of evolution. But please make sure that you go through the worksheet that we have sent to you, and make sure that you listen to this video again, and you ask your teachers when you need clarity on anything. And be sure to join us next week on the 14th of August, where we will be doing the last part of evolution, which is human evolution. Take care and good luck.